My mom told me I wasn't invited to the 4th of July cookout at my own grandmother's cabin. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just opened the envelope that changed everything. You want to see what real revenge looks like? Keep watching. My name is Danielle. I'm 41 years old. And this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The sun was hitting the lake just right that day. It came off the water in shards of white, like the surface was a mirror someone had cracked with a fist. That kind of perfect Michigan summer where everything smells like cut grass and hot charcoal, and lake water drying on sun-baked skin. A jet ski screeched in the distance. Gulls floated like they were bored. You could hear kids squealing from the water's edge, the slap of bare feet on the dock, the snap of a beer can opening, the crinkle of picnic blankets being laid out on the cabin deck, the kind of summer soundtrack that usually means you're safe. And we were standing there. Me, my husband Nate, and our twins, Ava and Miles. I'd pulled my hair into a low ponytail because the breeze kept lifting it. I had even worn the striped sundress Mom always used to say looked good on me. When she said it back then, it came with a laugh, a quick pinch at my waist, like she was reminding me to be small and pretty. Today, I wore it like armor. I'd baked 2 blueberry pies the night before, late, after the kids went down, the kitchen windows fogging with the heat of the oven. I'd cut the butter with the flour until it looked like wet sand, chilled the dough, rolled it out until my shoulders ached. Packed the cooler with lemonade, juice boxes with the little straws stuck to the sides, and the fancy local sausages Mom liked. The ones with fennel that leave a sweet taste on your tongue. It had been a while, long enough for memory to smooth over the rough spots, and I really thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the weekend she stopped icing us out. I wanted the kids to feel like the cabin still belonged to them too, like family was something solid you could lean on. But the second we stepped off the gravel road onto the cabin path, I saw her face. Mom was standing near the steps, holding a tray of deviled eggs in both hands like a waitress who'd rather be anywhere else. The paprika on top was sprinkled too heavy, little bruised constellations in yellow. Her expression went flat, cold, like we were delivery drivers who showed up at the wrong house. Her mouth did this thing where one side dipped down, the same look she used to give when I brought home a C in freshman biology. She didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't even say hi to the kids. She just shifted her weight and said it, clear as day. Mom, you weren't invited. Nate stopped walking. The cooler thumped against his shin. Miles blinked up at me like he didn't hear it right, his lashes sticky with lake humidity. Ava's little hand clenched tighter around my elbow until the bone in there started to ache. Me. Mom. It's the 4th of July. We always come to the cabin. Mom set the tray down on a cooler beside her with a careful, irritated click, like the eggs were fragile and I was not. Her eyes scanned me like I was tracking mud on the porch. I felt myself make my posture taller without thinking, the old reflex of trying to pass some test nobody wrote down. Mom, this year is different. My sister Colleen was standing nearby with her husband Bryce, red solo cup in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara. She didn't even try to hide the smirk. Colleen's smirks have chapters. This one said she'd been waiting for this scene since breakfast. Colleen, maybe next year, if she learns to behave. She pitched it just right, loud enough for the nearby cousins to hear. Someone chuckled under their breath. Plastic forks clicked against paper plates. Wordless looks were traded, like they'd all been handed scripts and rehearsed off-camera. I felt it hit the kids, how their bodies shifted, confused, like they did something wrong, like their limbs were suddenly too big or too small for the moment. I swallowed hard. The back of my throat tasted like metal. Didn't want to cry. Not in front of them. Not with Colleen watching like it was a TikTok. Me. We drove 3 hours. I made food. The kids. Mom. Danielle, don't make a scene. You should have known better after how last Christmas went. And there it was. The thing they never say directly. The ghost they drag out whenever they want to put me back in my place. If shame had a ringtone, that was it. A year ago, I spoke up about how Colleen was handling Grandma's will, about how things didn't line up, the signatures, the changes, the timing, the sudden revisions that just happened to push assets toward the person organizing the paperwork. Nothing dramatic, just questions. The kind a reasonable adult asks when a 91-year-old woman suddenly revises a trust at 2 in the morning on a week she was in and out of the hospital. The kind of questions a granddaughter asks when she's the one who brought soup every Thursday, who sat on the edge of the bed and painted Grandma's nails a shimmery pink, while Hallmark reruns murmured in the background. Suddenly, I was the problem. The dramatic one, the one who couldn't let things go. It's wild how fast a family can shift the spotlight so that you look like you're dancing alone on a stage you didn't pick. They never admitted anything was shady. Just turned the whole family against me like I had broken some invisible rule. Be nice. Be quiet. Don't ask for receipts. Keep the peace while they pick the lock. And now. Now they were using this cabin, my grandmother's cabin, as a weapon. The place where I learned to swim between the dock and the second buoy. Where Grandpa taught us to clean fish on newspaper, hands smelling like lake and lemon for hours. The place with my height marks in pencil on the pantry doorway, still there under a coat of paint, if you catch the light just right. I looked past my mom, past the crowd on the deck, past the red, white, and blue decorations wrapped around the railing like someone went too hard at Party City. There were sparklers in a mason jar near the stairs, a cheap Bluetooth speaker on a patio chair coughing out a country song about tailgates and forever. Everything inside me clenched, a full-body fist. But I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't argue. I let the silence coat my tongue and made myself comfortable in it. Every time I'd argued with them, every logical point, every receipt, every text message screenshot had just turned into another stick for them to beat me with. Not today. I looked at my kids. Miles was kicking a pebble with his shoe, not looking at anyone, shoulders up around his ears like his body was bracing for a sound that didn't come. Ava kept glancing between me and Grandma, her little face trying to solve the grown-up puzzle in front of her, her eyebrows knitting in that serious way that makes her look like a tiny judge. I crouched down. The gravel pressed into my knees. Me. Let's head back to the car, okay? We'll go get ice cream in town. Ava looked like she wanted to ask a question but didn't know which one. Miles nodded, grateful for a rule he understood. Ice cream is easy math. Nate didn't say a word. He just grabbed the cooler, one hand clenching the handle tighter than usual, his jaw flexing. He's not a fighter by nature. He's a fix-it person. But there wasn't a fix for this that didn't involve burning something down, and he knew I wouldn't let him. We turned, walked slowly back down that gravel path. The stones shifted under our sandals like they were trying to trip us. My stomach was on fire, but I kept my back straight. You learn, over years, to carry humiliation like groceries. Don't drop the eggs. Don't let them see you sweat. As we got to the car, I opened the trunk, set the cooler down, and unzipped the side pocket of my bag. My fingers were steady. It surprised me how calm they were. Maybe my body knew the plan before my brain did. There it was. The thick white envelope. The paper had a weight to it that felt like certainty. Inside, the notarized deed. The letter from the estate attorney. The trust update signed by my grandmother before she passed. And the small, folded note I found tucked inside her sewing table drawer last year, under a tangle of measuring tapes and a tomato pincushion that still had 2 needles poked into its belly, written in her own handwriting. Grandma, This cabin is for Danielle, because she saw me when no one else did. I stood there, staring at it. The ink was blue, a little shaky on the loops, but still Grandma, the way she wrote the G like it had hips. The smell of copy paper and old lavender rose off it like a blessing. I listened to the sounds of laughter echoing behind me from the cabin deck, the clatter of tongs, a chorus of small talk, the hollow sound of people pretending they're better than they are, and I knew I wasn't leaving. Not today. Me. Take the kids to get ice cream. I'll be right behind you. Nate stepped closer, searching my face like there was a third option I might be hiding. His hand touched the small of my back. Warm, steady. Nate. Are you sure? I nodded. I didn't need to explain it. He saw the envelope. He knew enough to trust the gravity of it. He bent and kissed Ava's hair, ruffled Miles's cap, got them buckled into the back seat, his movements efficient the way he gets when nerves are a tide rising fast. The car doors thumped shut, and the sound felt like a promise. I turned, walked back toward the sound of the grill, the smell of corn, the people who thought they'd won. The envelope was under my arm where a clutch bag might sit, and my steps took on this slow, film noir energy I didn't know I had in me. My sandals tapped the boards of the dock like a metronome. I felt my heartbeat matching it. Mom was setting up the next round of hot dogs. She had her party face back on, that efficient smile with no warmth behind it, laughing at something Bryce said about boat maintenance like she had a clue. Colleen was bragging to someone about her new patio renovation, her voice turned up to that fake bright setting she uses when she wants you to hear her from 3 rooms away. Words like travertine and custom and imported floated in the air like perfume you didn't consent to. No one noticed me at first. The strange thing about being told you're not invited to a place you own is how invisible you feel and how furious that invisibility makes you. I moved through the edge of the crowd, brushing shoulders with people who have known me since I was 12, people who taught me to play euchre and gave me rides to volleyball practice, and not a single one reached out a hand. I felt the absence like cold on my skin, until I stepped up onto the deck. Me. Before we leave, there's something everyone should know about this cabin. I didn't shout. I just aimed my voice like a beam and let it go. Silence fell like someone turned the volume knob to 0. Heads turned. Plastic tilted. A cousin's kid dropped a chip and watched it fall like it might make a sound that would explain everything. Colleen squinted at me like I was speaking another language, like English itself had betrayed her. Mom blinked, annoyed then wary. She hates when an audience shifts. She hates not being the director. Mom. Danielle, don't start this again. Colleen. Oh, please. What could she possibly announce? I held up the envelope, peeled it open slowly, letting the papers breathe in the open air. The sunlight slid across the letterhead and lit up the embossed seal like a tiny moon. My hand didn't shake. It was like my bones were satisfied to finally be doing something that matched the truth. Me. I wasn't going to say anything, but since you made it clear, I'm not invited. I unfolded the deed and raised it slightly, not waving it, just showing it. Let me remind you who actually owns this cabin. They stared, like I'd pulled out a grenade with the pin already gone. You could feel the shock ripple through bodies, that quick intake of breath before a wave hits. Somebody's Bluetooth speaker cut off mid-chorus like it got embarrassed. Me. This is the legal deed to the property. Grandma left it to me in her will. Everything was filed through the county clerk's office in Kalkaska 2 months after she passed. You've been hosting your little cookouts on my land. Colleen's face cracked first. She has tells. The blink rate picks up. The lips part, like the truth just sucked the moisture out of the room. She blinked too many times. Her mouth opened, then shut, then did a tiny tremble she tried to hide with a laugh that came out dry. Bryce muttered something under his breath. A little, "Oh, come on." That told me exactly how much he knew, and how much he wished he didn't. Mom looked at me, and for the first time that day, she looked unsure. The part of her that's always calculating took an extra beat. She glanced at the paper, at my face, at the crowd. That's the thing with people like her. They don't fear the truth. They fear losing the room. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even step closer. I let the paper do the stepping. Me. I've been letting you use the cabin out of respect. But now that you've made it clear we're not welcome. I let the pause land. Counted 1, 2. Heard a fork scrape a plate behind me. The cookout ends now. Someone near the grill stepped back. The tongs clanged against the lid. Cups lowered. A plate clattered onto a folding table behind me, a little bounce and spin that kept going because nobody reached to stop it. A flag garland lifted in the breeze and tapped the railing like applause with no hands. I could feel it. That beautiful stillness when truth slices through denial. It's like the first pain of a pulled splinter, sharp, clean, and then relief rushes in like blood returning to a numbed hand. All the years of being told to be quiet, all the sideways comments about attitude and tone and gratitude, all of it sat down and shut up for a second. Colleen finally found words, aiming them like darts that won't stick. Colleen, you can't just show up and... Me. Own what I own? She flushed. Bryce looked at the deck boards like they might offer him a tunnel. Mom's jaw flinched. That tiny tick I remember from the days she'd catch me breaking curfew. She tried for a different tack. Softer. The voice she uses for neighbors and cops. Mom. Danielle, if you wanted to have a conversation, there were other ways to... Me. I did. I tried. I texted. I called. I came at Christmas with questions and receipts, and you called me dramatic. You blocked my number for a month. I mailed copies to your house and you wrote return to sender on the envelope and slid it under my door. This is me being clear. I turned the deed so the page caught the sun the way a plane's wing does when it banks, and my name glowed. Danielle Ann Porter. The notary stamp was a circle of authority you could feel. The letter from the estate attorney had dates that matched the timeline nobody wanted to discuss. And in my bag, tucked like a small fire, was Grandma's note. The only proof that ever mattered to me. The one nobody could wave away with a shrug. Behind me, a cousin whispered, "Is this real?" And another cousin said, "It looks real." And someone else said, "Well then." And you could hear scurrying calculations, social math getting redone in real time. That's the thing about truth. It's contagious if you let people breathe around it. Me. You told me I wasn't invited. I'm telling you. Pack up. You're trespassing. I said it calmly, like I was reading a weather report. No heat. Just forecast. You could feel the words settle on the deck like pollen. A few people coughed from the sweetness of it. The unfamiliarity of air without spin. Colleen started laughing, too loud, that brittle bark that says fear dressed up as confidence. She shot a look at Mom. Mom didn't catch it. Mom was reading. She stepped closer, took the paper from the edge like it might burn her, and scanned. Her mouth moved on the dates. Her finger found the parcel number. The old school teacher in her couldn't help verifying. When she looked up, her eyes were damp, but not from kindness. From losing. Mom. We'll need to verify this. Me. Go ahead. Kalkaska County Clerk's Office. They're closed today, obviously, but their website's public. It's in the system. Bryce pulled out his phone one-handed, thumbs moving, lips pressed thin. Colleen watched him like he might find a trapdoor. He didn't. I saw the moment his shoulders drop a fraction. The part of him that values facts more than family theater reared its head and said, "Buddy, it's real." Ava's laughter carried from the parking area, high and bright, an echo from the car as Nate tried to make a game out of buckles and playlists. It threaded through the silence like a lifeline. I felt my throat get tight, but it wasn't sadness. It was relief. It was the knowledge that my kids would see me choose them over a tradition that chose to humiliate them. Someone made a move toward the grill and then stood still, like the act of flipping a hot dog had suddenly become morally complicated. A breeze lifted the corner of a paper plate and sent it skipping across the deck until it hit the leg of the picnic table and gave up. Mom handed the paper back, fingers careful not to touch mine, like contact might make the loss real. She was already building a story. I could see it forming behind her eyes, a new narrative where I was ungrateful, vindictive, power-hungry. I didn't care. People will call you hungry the second you stop starving. Me. You can finish what's on the grill if you want. Pack it in foil. Take it with you. But the gathering is over. I'll expect keys from anyone who has a copy. Locks get changed Monday. Colleen. You can't talk to us like... Me. Like the owner? I didn't smile. I wasn't cruel. I just refused to step back into the smaller shape of myself they preferred. There's a difference. You feel it in your bones when you make it. A cousin's husband said, "Okay, I guess we're going." To no one in particular. He started stacking plates in a garbage bag. The motion broke whatever spell was left. People started moving, gathering sunglasses and towels, sliding shoes back on, calling for kids, making that embarrassed small talk people make when they're caught on the wrong side of a line. It wasn't dramatic. It was awkward. Sometimes power isn't a slam, it's a quiet click, like a door unlocking. Mom stood very still, adjusting the edge of a dish towel that didn't need adjusting. Colleen put her sunglasses on to hide her eyes. Bryce lifted the lid on the grill, then shut it, then lifted it again, like repetition could give him purpose. I tucked the papers back into the envelope and slid it into my bag, felt the weight of it settle like a promise in the curve of my hip. My heart wasn't racing anymore. The heat in my stomach had cooled to something else. Focus. A steadiness I hadn't felt in months. I didn't stay to watch everyone file off the deck. That's not the high I wanted. I stepped down the stairs, let my hand brush the thick rope of the railing, felt the splinters and the sun-warm fibers, all the texture of a place that belonged to me long before the paperwork did. I crossed the yard. The grass was a little long. I made a note to mow tomorrow, to edge along the flower beds Grandma used to weed in a floppy hat and rubber gloves. I could hear the thud of car doors, the muted start of engines, the low apology of tires rolling over gravel. When I reached the path, I looked back once. Not for them, but for me. The cabin sat square and stubborn, its windows catching sky, the porch flags lifting and falling. I remembered Grandpa's laugh curling off that porch like smoke. I remembered the way Grandma used to press my hand and say, "Baby, stand up straight, even when they push." Especially then. I kept walking. The sun was higher now, the heat flattening the shadows. The car waited at the bend, and I could see Ava's hand pressed to the back window, palm open, like a high five to the future. I lifted my hand to meet it through the glass. Miles leaned over the center console, eyes big, mouth open with a question. I opened the door and slid in. Nate's eyes flicked to my face, quick, searching, then softened when he saw what he needed to see. "Nate, you good?" "Me. I'm better than good." We pulled away slow, the tires crunching through a line of discarded bottle caps someone would have picked up if the party had gone the way they planned. I didn't look in the rear view. You don't need to when you finally decide where you're going. The lake flashed to our right in long silver blinks. The road pulled us toward town, toward ice cream and a new ritual, toward a story I would tell not to hurt them, but to remind myself what happens when you refuse to shrink. They laughed when I walked out. They didn't know I was walking away with everything. Now they did. And this is only the beginning. The silence was heavier than the humidity. I could feel it pressing against my skin the way wet heat sits on your shoulders in July. A slow blanket you cannot shake off. I could hear the slow buzz of cicadas in the trees, patient and mechanical. The gentle lap of the lake water against the dock, wood creaking as it took the small waves like old bones taking stairs, and nothing else. Not a chair scrape, not a laugh, not that easy background murmur families do when they forget they can be cruel. Not a single voice. No one was laughing anymore. That familiar chorus of two loud uncles and cousins trying to top each other had drained out of the scene like a speaker unplugged mid-song. No one was flipping burgers. The grill lid sat slightly ajar, smoke leaking in a thin ribbon that smelled like pepper and fat and something almost sweet. No one was offering anyone another drink. The red cups looked suddenly childish in adult hands, props left behind after the play closed. Mom didn't move. She stood there, one hand still holding a pair of metal tongs, like the grill was going to save her if she stood faithful enough. The tongs glinted in the sun. Her knuckles were white on the handle. I could see a smear of mustard on her thumb, and the small, ridiculous intimacy of that detail made something tight and hot rise up in me. Me. Do you want me to read it out loud? I did not raise my voice. I did not ask twice. I lifted the notarized page just enough for the heading to catch the light. The paper made that faint whisper, expensive stationery rubbing against itself. The embossed seal flashed. I felt the deck boards under my sandals, warm and slightly soft from sun and age. I could have recited it from memory, but I wanted the words to come from the paper, not from me. Let the document speak. Let the official language do what my family refused to let me do. Me. This is a certified transfer of property deed from the Kalkaska County Clerk's Office, filed under trust document number 8845 KG, signed by Grandma Ruth Simmons before her passing. I looked directly at Mom. Her mouth had flattened to a hard line. Her eyes were glassy in that way that looks like tears but is really calculation. How to pivot, how to spin, how to get the room back. Me. Signed 2 months before you tried to change the will. She dropped the tongs. The clang on the deck was sharp. A clean metal note that skittered across the planks and got lost under the table leg. Somebody flinched. A kid sucked in a breath like they were about to cry, and then remembered nobody here was crying, so they swallowed it down and bit their lip. Colleen finally spoke, but her voice cracked on the first syllable. She tried to recover, cleared her throat, tried for that bored tone she uses when she wants to make you feel small for caring. Colleen. This is insane. That is not real. Mom has had the cabin for years. Me. Mom has used the cabin. She never owned it. I felt the words find their place in the air. Solid. Heavy. They stayed there between us like a piece of furniture nobody could lift. I turned slowly, looking at each person gathered. Uncles, aunts, cousins, people who once used to ruffle my hair or ask how school was going, who sent graduation cards with $20 bills in them and signed their names with hearts. People I babysat for, people who taught me to bait a hook, people who sat shoulder to shoulder on this deck watching fireworks across the lake and shared blankets when the wind came up off the water. Now they stared at me like I was ruining something sacred, but I wasn't ruining anything. I was done pretending. Me. The original deed was in Grandma's name. She put it into a living trust before she passed. That trust assigned full ownership of the property to me, not Mom, not Colleen. Me. Someone dropped their cup. The sound of lemonade spilling over the wooden deck made me flinch, not from fear, but because for a second it sounded like the lake rising to take the boards back. A bee landed on the rim and took a sip like nature does not care about our paperwork. I unfolded the last item in the envelope. The small, worn letter, folded into thirds, the creases soft from being opened and closed. By my hands on nights when I needed proof I was not making any of this up. Grandma's handwriting had faded slightly, but the curve of each letter was still her. She had a way of making her capital D look like a little flag. I could see the ink feather where the pen paused. Me. Danielle, if you're holding this, it means your mother is trying to take what is not hers. I trusted you to protect the cabin, because you loved it the way I did. Because you stayed with me through every storm. Because you did not forget me when the others did. My voice shook. Just a little. It was not fragile. It was the kind of tremor that comes when something true finally pushes through muscle and bone to daylight. I heard my own breath at the end of the last sentence, a small exhale, and in that breath, I heard nights by Grandma's bed, listening to the oxygen machine sigh and click, heard the scrape of the walker, heard the way soup smells different when you carry it across a living room towards someone who needs you. I folded the letter back up slowly, pressing the crease with my thumb. The paper was warm from my hand. I slid it back into the envelope like I was returning a key to a lock that would always open for me. Me. I tried to stay quiet. I tried to let it go. But you crossed a line when you humiliated me in front of my kids. Mom, this is a family tradition. Me. Exactly. A family tradition, not a Colleen-exclusive backyard show. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked around like someone would step in, like an aunt would clear her throat and start telling a story, like an uncle would make a joke that would break the moment and let everyone laugh it off. But no one did. They were watching something else now. They were watching power move. People started shifting, clearing their throats. It was small, respectful motion at first, like in church when the service ends and nobody wants to be the first to stand. Then the practical folks got to work. Some started picking up napkins, drinks, folding chairs. A cousin bent to unplug the speaker that had already gone silent. Another slid foil over a tray of corn with a careful, apologetic touch. Eyes stayed down. No sudden moves. Stillness moving toward exit. I did not have to say anything else. The damage was done. Nate came walking up the path behind me, kids in tow. I heard the crunch of gravel first, then the squeak of the cooler wheels, then the familiar cadence of his steps that my body recognizes without looking. He did not say a word. He just stood by me, arm close enough that I could feel the heat of him without touching, eyes on the scene. He took it in the way he takes in a job site, scanning, counting, measuring what needs to happen next. Miles. Mom, are we going home? His voice was small and careful, like he was testing the ground before he stepped. His hair stuck to his forehead in tiny commas from the sweat. Ava clutched the strap of her little bag, the one with stickers peeling at the edges, her eyes moving across faces like she was trying to learn a new language in a minute. Me. Yeah, baby. We are going home. Home did not mean a street address in that sentence. It meant a decision. It meant the boundary we were drawing right here that would teach them something I wish I had learned earlier. You do not stay where you are humiliated. You do not ask people to be better while giving them your throat. I took one last look around. The decorations that used to mean something. The red, white, and blue pinwheels that used to spin in the dusk like the whole lake was breathing. The paper lanterns someone had strung between the porch posts that would have looked pretty when the sun dropped, and the fireflies came out. The laughter that once felt like home. All of it now felt like set dressing on a lie. Plastic joy over rotten wood. Me. If you are still here in 15 minutes, I will be calling the sheriff. This is not your cookout anymore. This is my property, and it is time you all left. Mom flinched like I slapped her. It was in the eyes, that quick flash of disbelief that somebody you trained to be quiet could speak like that. Colleen looked like she was about to throw up. Her skin went a little gray at the edges, and she pressed her tongue against her molars the way she does when she is holding back words that would cost her. Bryce reached for her elbow and missed, his hand floating in the air like it did not know where to land. But I turned, took Nate's hand, walked with the kids back to the car. My feet moved steady. No rush, no stumble. The deckboards hummed under footsteps behind us as people started to collect their things, that soft chaos of exit, a chair folded with a snap, a zipper rasped on a duffel filled with towels. Someone whispered, "I did not know." And someone else whispered back, "I think she tried to tell us." They still did not understand the full weight of what had happened. How could they? They are kids. They are supposed to be thinking about popsicles and sand between toes and the way fireworks feel in your chest when they are close. But one day, they would. They would recall the outline, if not the details. They would remember this heat, this driveway, this sky. They would remember that their mother stood up, that she did not yell, did not curse, did not swing. She just stood and let the truth speak for itself, which is not passive. It is the hardest, most explosive posture there is, holding your spine straight while the room does the math. Back in the car, the air smelled like sunscreen and the vinyl that always gets too hot, and a hint of blueberry pie from the pan covered with foil in the back. Nate handed me a water bottle. The condensation rolled down over my fingers, cold and slippery. I did not know I was thirsty until the water hit my tongue and I could feel my whole body say yes. Nate. That was something? Me. She told me I was not invited, so I reminded her whose name is written on the deed. He did not smile. He did not need to. His eyes did that softening thing that makes the lines at the corner show up more, and I felt the space between us fill with a quiet agreement. We were done playing small for their comfort. He set the bottle in the cup holder, gripped the wheel, and he drove. The kids were quiet in the back, tired, sun-warmed. Miles watched trees flick by like green film frames. Ava drew on the fogged part of the window with her finger, little hearts that disappeared as soon as she finished them. The radio stayed off. We did not need music. The tires hummed. The road rose and fell, that gentle up-down that always makes me think of breath. I let the silence settle in my bones. It fit. It felt earned. We passed the old bait shop with the sign that never hung straight. We passed the hand-painted board that said, "Sweet corn, $5 a dozen," with the 5 crossed out and a 6 scrawled over it. We passed a kid on a bike towing a little wagon full of fireworks that rattled as he took the corner. Life kept unfolding. People bought ice. People dragged coolers. Somebody was going to have a beautiful afternoon at their own cabin where nobody told them they did not belong. It was not just about the cabin. It was about what the cabin had become. A stage where they rehearsed who they were and who I was supposed to be. It was about being erased for so long that you start to write your own name on the inside of your wrist, so you do not forget it when they call you something else. And finally, being seen. Not by them. I stopped needing that today. By myself. By my kids. By the version of my grandmother that lives in my head and laughs when I do the brave thing. By the future that keeps sliding toward me whether I stand up or not. The road curved and the lake vanished behind a stand of pines. For a second the shade cooled the car and I felt the goosebumps rise on my forearms. Nate glanced at me. I nodded. We did not need words. The next stop would be ice cream. The one after that would be a hardware store to schedule a locksmith. A call to the county on Monday to confirm what was already confirmed. Maybe a lawyer if Mom tried something loud and useless. Practical steps. A list I could write on the back of a receipt while the kids dripped chocolate on their shoes. I pressed my palm flat against my thigh and felt the thud of my own pulse. It was steady. Not adrenaline. Not fight or flight. Something else. Like when you finally get the last knot out of a chain and it falls into your hand in one clean line. I looked out the window. A hawk rode the breeze, wings open, just letting the air hold it. It looked easy from here. I knew it was not. But I also knew what it felt like to cede the win to someone who had not earned it. I was done with that. We hit the main road. The asphalt shimmered in the heat like water. A semi blew past, the wind of it rocking our car for a second, and Ava laughed, surprised by the jolt. Miles said, "Whoa," and then smiled at his sister like they had survived something together. They had. We all had. We would again. But next time, it would not hurt like this. Next time, the bruise would be memory, not fresh. I closed my eyes and saw Grandma's note again, the loopy letters, the way she put a little heart over the I in my name when she was feeling playful. Danielle, because you saw me. It landed in me like a seed hitting good soil. I felt the root take. The rest would grow because I would keep watering it, not with their approval, with my own attention. We rolled into town. The flag over the post office pulled against its halyard. The diner had a chalkboard out front that said pies today, and I wanted to laugh at how the universe loved a theme. The ice cream shop had a line to the sidewalk. Kids with sticky hands, teens with sunburned noses, parents who already looked tired of the holiday, and it was not even noon. We found a spot. Nate parked. The kids unbuckled with the clatter of plastic and enthusiasm. I touched his arm before he opened his door. He looked at me. Me. Thank you. He nodded. He did not say for what. The list was too long. We got out. The heat hit again, but it felt different now. Less like a hand on the back of my neck, and more like a weight I could carry easily. We joined the line. Ava pressed her face to the glass when we got inside and made a tiny gasp at the sight of sprinkles, a sound like a bird letting go of a tree branch. Miles asked for the weirdest flavor he could find, and then changed his mind twice, and ended up with chocolate, because some things are classic for a reason. I got lemon. Nate got black cherry because he is loyal to his choices like that. We sat on the curb outside because the picnic tables were full. The concrete was warm through my dress. A man set off a small firework down the block, and it fizzed and cracked and then failed. A little puff of smoke drifting up like a ghost of excitement. The kids licked fast to beat the drip. I watched them and felt a wave of pride that had nothing to do with the cabin and everything to do with the way they had stood next to me on that deck and not looked away. When we finished, Nate wiped a smear of chocolate from Miles's cheek with his thumb and then sucked it off, which made Miles laugh so hard he snorted. Ava offered me her last bite, solemn and generous, and I took it because it felt holy to be offered anything today. We threw our napkins away. We stood up. The day waited. The lake still shimmered behind all those pines. The cabin still stood right where it always had. And now, finally, the story inside it was true again. We didn't talk much on the drive home. The car felt like a small boat on a wide, hot sea, floating on the hum of the tires and the soft rattle in the door that we keep meaning to fix. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, the kind that's a lid on a pot you're holding with a towel because it's too hot to touch. Nate kept his hand on the wheel, eyes steady on the road like if he focused hard enough, it would all slide off us. He does that. Finds a straight line and holds it. His knuckles were a little pale. There was a sunburn starting at the edge of his sleeve. I watched the tendons in his wrist flex when he turned, watched the way he checked the rear view without really seeing anything but motion and distance. Miles fell asleep about 20 minutes in, his head against the window. His mouth fell open the tiniest bit. A soft little "oh," and his breath fogged the glass in a rhythm I could have set a metronome to. The seatbelt cut across his faded t-shirt, the one with the dinosaur that's cracking in the middle because he refuses to stop wearing it. His fingers twitched once like he was still kicking that pebble at the cabin, finishing the motion. somewhere safe. Ava just stared out at the trees flying by, her fingers curled around the edge of her booster seat. She does that when she's overwhelmed. Grip something. A strap. A blanket. My hand. The pines whipped past like a flipbook. She tracked them with those serious eyes like she could catalog each one and make a system out of a day that refused to make sense. And me? I just watched the envelope. It sat on my lap like it was breathing. The flap pressed down smooth, the corner a little dog-eared from being slid in and out too many times. It was just paper, and it felt like a dumb thing to love. But I loved it. The weight. The way it had its own gravity. My palm rested on it, and the heat of my skin bled into it until I couldn't tell if it was warming me or I was warming it. That one piece of paper, that folded stack of truth, was heavier than anything I'd carried in years. Heavier than the nights I stayed awake listening for Grandma to call my name. Heavier than the holiday silence that spreads through a room when you speak up and everyone decides to hear tone instead of content. Heavier than the way my mother said not invited like it was etiquette, not cruelty. I thought I'd feel better. Thought it'd feel like winning. Like a bell rang somewhere and confetti fell. Like a soundtrack kicked in with something triumphant, and the camera pulled back to a wide shot of the lake, the light all golden and forgiving. But all I felt was empty, like someone drained out the noise, and all that was left was the echo. My heart wasn't pounding anymore. It was tired. The kind of tired that comes after you finally move a couch that's been sitting in the wrong place for years. You look at the clean spot on the floor. You sit on the armrest. You breathe. We hit a stretch of road where the asphalt ripples, and the car did that gentle bounce that always makes me think of laughter, even when nobody's laughing. Nate glanced over. I gave him a small nod. He nodded back. A code we've built without words. You good? I'm here. Keep going. He pulled into our driveway just as the sun started dipping. The sky had that bruised peach color that makes power lines look like careful pencil marks. The lawn was dry and uneven. No lake, no deck, no glittering porch lights. Just home. The hose curled like a sleeping snake near the spigot. Our mailbox leaned a little, stubborn in its lean, because we keep saying we'll fix it next weekend. I got the kids inside, got them washed up, and into bed. Their bodies were heavy with the particular exhaustion that comes from heat and confusion. I ran a washcloth over Miles's forehead and he squinted but didn't wake. Ava brushed her teeth while staring at herself in the mirror, like her reflection might explain the day back to her in simpler terms. No questions from them. No tears. Just a quiet kind of confusion. The kind that rearranges their trust in the world a half inch at a time. Like maybe they sensed we didn't just leave a cookout. We left a whole version of our family behind. Like we drove away from a map we thought we knew how to read, and now there's a blank space where a road should be. Monsters on old charts. Here be. I tucked them in, smoothed the sheet, kissed their foreheads. Ava held my wrist for a second, her fingers cool, and then let go like she was satisfied by the pulse she found there. I turned off the lamp and stood in the doorway listening to the small sounds of sleep, the tiny whistles and sighs. For a second I let the darkness wash over what was left of my anger until it felt less like a wave and more like a tide going out. Later that night, after Nate went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded Grandma's letter again. The kitchen light pooled yellow on the laminate like a cheap halo. The fridge hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked once and decided it wasn't worth it. Same words, same ink. But now I read it slower, like I needed to believe she really meant it. Like the letters themselves were small doors I could walk through and stand in the room where she wrote them. I traced the indent where her pen pressed harder on trusted. I could see her sitting in that recliner by the window, the one with the little rip in the arm from Grandpa's belt buckle years ago. I could see the way she'd pause to lick her finger and turn the page even though she didn't need to. Habit. Gesture. I trusted you. Those 3 words kept circling, not in a heavy way, like swallows at dusk, looping and looping until the air looks alive. It wasn't just the cabin. It was the way she used to pour me a mug of cocoa before my parents got into another fight. The way she would set it on the counter and say, "Take it to your room, baby," like it was a password to safety. The way she kept a spare toothbrush in her drawer for me, like she always knew I might need to stay. No explanations, no drama, just a drawer opening and a little green handle next to the toothpaste. I was the only one who visited her that last winter. The only one who brought her soup when she got the flu. Chicken noodle the way she liked it, extra carrots, more dill than the recipe called for. The only one who knew she still hummed old church songs while folding laundry. Soft little half melodies that got stuck in your head and followed you out to the car, into the grocery store, into the rest of your life. And somehow, that made me the enemy. For remembering, for mattering, for not letting the story be tidy and convenient for the people who wanted convenience most. I thought of Mom counting casseroles, like that was love. I thought of Colleen with a color-coded calendar and a way of saying, "I've got it handled," that meant don't you dare look too close. I stayed up late that night, typing out an email to the family. Short, professional, not a manifesto, not a fight, a record. I kept my tone dry because they love to point at tone. They eat tone for breakfast. I gave them nothing to chew. Dear all, this is to confirm that the legal deed and estate documents transferring ownership of the lakefront cabin to me, Danielle Simmons, are available upon request. Effective immediately, the property is closed to all unauthorized use. Please consider this formal notice. I attached scans of the documents. Clean, crisp, every page. The notary stamp visible. The date circled in red like we were all going to be quizzed later. I CC'd everyone, every branch, even Bryce, especially Bryce. I hovered on the send button long enough to hear my own heartbeat and then I clicked it. The soft whoosh felt too gentle for what it carried. Then I hit send. I stared at the screen for a long time after. The cursor blinked in the white space of the draft window like it was breathing. I half expected the email to hop back out of my sent folder and run around the room on little legs. I waited for the immediate ding, for the flood. Next morning, it started. Not at dawn. The kind of people who thrive on control sleep in after a public humiliation. But by 9, the phone had decided we were in a group chat we didn't sign up for. The texts, the calls, the fake apologies, the frantic attempts to rewrite history. The subject lines that tried to sound neutral and came off like threat dressed in business casual. Colleen. You really think Grandma wanted you to ruin our family over this? I read it twice. The projection of it. The way she shoved ruin in my lap like I hadn't been the one carrying love back and forth across town in Tupperware. I let it sit. Mom, this isn't how we handle things. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Handle. Like pain is an object to be fingered and rotated in the light until it lands at the angle that flatters you. Embarrassed me. Not you hurt me. Not, I'm sorry. Embarrassed me. The brand priority shining through. Uncle Rick. Do you really need to keep the cabin? Why not sell and split the profit like normal people? That one made me laugh out loud. Like normal people. As if normal was something any of us had been in that family since 1989. As if a split in the absence of honesty was fairness. As if equity was a yard sale where whoever shows up first gets the best stuff. I didn't respond. Not for 3 days. I watched the messages stack. Green dots. Blue dots. Voicemail transcription guessing at the words and missing the point. I let them echo in a room I didn't walk into. I put my phone on the windowsill and let the sun warm it until it felt like a small animal. Until I got a knock on the door. You can hear confidence in a knock. You can hear entitlement too. That knock. Too aggressive, too performative. It was Colleen. There's a cadence to the way she announces herself. A 3-beat and a pause, like a judge entering. I knew it before I opened it. My stomach did a small, resigned flip and then settled. She stood there, with her sunglasses on, arms crossed, like she was filming a courtroom drama in her head. Her hair was perfect. She'd chosen a blouse that said approachable but expensive. Lipstick a shade called something like peony or rose quartz. She kept her chin up like the sunlight was a reporter she needed to address. Colleen, we need to talk. Me. There's nothing left to talk about. Colleen took a measured step forward, the heel of her sandal clicking against our entryway tile. She glanced into our living room like she might find backup on our couch. When she didn't, she adjusted her purse strap and tried a different angle. Colleen, you're not actually going to keep the place to yourself. You're just doing this for attention, right? Me. You mean the cabin you kicked me out of? The one you laughed about in front of my kids? She dropped the sunglasses to her chest, the arms catching on the collar of her blouse. Her eyes were sharp and bright, and a little wild around the edges. I could see the calculator running behind them. If she could get me to raise my voice, she could be the calm one. If she could get me to say something mean, she could be the reasonable one. The script was laid out. I declined my lines. Colleen. It was a joke. Me. And this is the punchline. Her mouth did a small twitch, the start of a smile that knew it wouldn't land. I started to close the door, but her hand shot out, stopping it. Her nails were a perfect pale pink. There was a thin gold ring on her index finger I'd never seen before. I looked at that ring while she spoke, to keep myself from looking at her mouth. Colleen, you're not better than us. You just got lucky. That one hit different. Not because it was true, because it told the whole story. They couldn't believe I'd actually earned something, that Grandma saw me, that love and time and loyalty could matter more than manipulation, that the person making soup and cleaning pill organizers and showing up at 2 a.m. is the person a dying woman might choose, not the person who can charm a notary and smile for pictures. Me. I didn't get lucky, I just didn't forget her. Colleen blinked. Slow, offended, like I'd said a cuss word in church. She regrouped in real time, eyes narrowing, mouth smoothing into what she thinks is calm. Colleen, you think this is over? You humiliated Mom? She's been crying for 2 days. Me. Good. Maybe she'll remember how it feels. The words came out quiet, not cruel. I didn't put a knife edge on them. I just handed them over like a receipt. I let the door close that time. The latch clicked with a small, decisive sound that I felt in my ribs. I locked it. The deadbolt slid home. I stood there with my forehead against the cool wood for a count of 5. The house was still. The refrigerator hummed. In the hallway, a toy car sat half under the console table, the kind of small domestic detail that brings you right back to yourself. I took a deep breath. Then I opened my laptop. It was time to go deeper. I started going through every document Grandma ever gave me, every receipt, every scan, every sticky note with a date or code. The old manila folder I'd labeled with a Sharpie in a hurry one night when I was too tired to be neat. The subfolders on my desktop that said things like Ruth Trust and Tax 2019 and pharmacy list with numbers behind them. I pulled everything into one place. I made a list. I made columns. I let the part of my brain that loves order off the leash. Because it wasn't just about the cabin now. I had a feeling. There was more. I opened the envelope again and slid the letter out, just to set it beside the keyboard like a small guardian. I pulled up the scan of the trust update, the one with the notary seal clean and perfect. I zoomed in on Grandma's signature. I knew the way she made the S in Simmons like a wave. I knew the tremor that had crept into her hand in the last year, the tiny shiver at the end of each line. This was hers. No argument. I clicked through to the email thread with the estate attorney. The timestamps, the attachments, the clarity. I opened the PDF of the county filing receipt and read the parcel number out loud to the empty room, like saying it turned the numbers into a blessing. On the kitchen table, a small ring of water from my glass spread slowly, making a ghost circle. I moved the letter out of its reach. I opened the file labeled Will Revision Photo, the one I took on my phone last Christmas when Colleen left the folder on the counter to go answer the door, and I stood there with my heart beating in my ears and took pictures like a spy. I remembered the guilt that flushed me then. I felt none now. I zoomed in on the date. I zoomed in on the notary stamp that didn't match the one she claimed. I zoomed in on the inconsistency that had nagged at me in the middle of the night for months, the subtle mismatch you can't explain to people who don't want to see it. I made notes. I wrote times. I wrote names. I wrote my memory of who was at what meeting and which cousin mentioned a thing in passing that seemed random then and necessary now. I stacked proof next to proof. Not for them. Not anymore. But for me. To make the shape of what I had lived so clear that even my most generous self couldn't soften it back into something polite. My phone buzzed again. I let it. Then, because I am not a masochist, I turned it face down and slid it across the table until the buzz sounded far away, like a lawnmower on the next block. In the hallway, the nightlight glowed like a tiny moon. I could hear Nate turning over in bed. A soft rustle. A sigh. He trusts me to carry what I'm carrying. I felt that trust settle across my shoulders like a jacket that actually fits. I opened a new document and titled it what it was: Timeline. I started at the beginning. The fall Grandma slipped on the back steps and pretended she didn't. The physical therapy. The first time Mom said, "We've got it handled," and then called me at midnight to ask if I could pick up prescriptions because Colleen was swamped. The first home health aide who lasted a week because Mom micromanaged her into quitting. The second who stayed because she and I made a system around Mom's chaos and protected it like it was a secret garden. I wrote the afternoon I found the first draft of a trust in the stack of catalogs by Grandma's chair. The pen circles, the notes in her handwriting that said things like, "Ask Danielle and double-check the taxes." I wrote the day Colleen showed up with a notary I'd never met, and a big smile, and said, "It'll just be 2 minutes." And how Grandma looked at me over her glasses and said, "What do you think, honey?" And how I said, "Let's wait until you've had lunch." And how Colleen's smile didn't reach the ends of her eyes after that. I wrote the part where Mom screamed at me in the pantry with the door cracked so anyone walking by would only hear my voice if I raised it. I didn't raise it. She hated that. I kept going. I wrote until the lines of text felt like a path I could walk tomorrow with a lawyer's hand in mine if it came to that. I let my hands do what my heart was not ready to admit out loud. We were not done. The cabin was chapter 1, maybe chapter 2. The book was longer, the plot thicker, the kind that knots in your stomach and then loosens when you name it. At some point, the house shifted into true night. The fridge hummed and paused. The street out front quieted. A car rolled by with bass thudding, a quick slice of a life not mine, then gone. I stretched my fingers. I breathed. I rubbed my eyes, and the room turned into a smear of light for a second and then sharpened again. I picked up Grandma's letter one more time and pressed my thumb against the crease. Not to fold it again. To feel the line. To remember that there are ridges in the things that save us. You can run your finger along them in the dark and know where you are. I slipped the letter back into its envelope like a lullaby. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, and in it I saw my reflection, faint and doubled. I looked tired. I looked like someone who had finally decided to stop asking for permission. I turned off the kitchen light. The dark wasn't heavy. It was neutral. I stood there and listened for a long beat. The house breathed around me. My chest answered. I walked down the hall and paused by the kids' door. I listened to their sleep. I rested my palm against the wood like I could press a blessing through it. Then I went to bed. Nate stirred. I slid under the sheet and he reached for me without waking up fully, his hand finding my hip like it always does. I let myself be held by the ordinary. It wasn't just about the cabin now. I had a feeling. There was more. I went back to the cabin a week later. Alone. I told Nate. I needed quiet. I told the kids Grandma's place needed me to check in. I did not add that I needed to hear the house breathe without anyone else's lungs in the room. No kids, no Nate, no distractions. Just me, the trees, and the quiet weight of history riding in the passenger seat like an old friend who does not talk much. I left early. The kind of early where the neighborhood is still blue around the edges and the world feels like it is holding its breath. The sun was rising through the pine needles by the time I turned off the county road. The gravel still had a wet sheen from overnight rain, and the tires hissed over it like a whisper trying not to wake the lake. The same kind of morning I used to spend sitting on the swing with Grandma. Feet tucked under. A blanket, even in July, because she swore the breeze off the water could find your bones. Before the family started treating this place like a stage. Before every holiday was blocking and lights and the same tired script. The key still worked. I held it in my palm and felt the little teeth like a secret. Not that anyone had changed the locks. They never expected me to come back without permission. They still thought I was the outsider. The one who needed an invitation to a home that already knew my footsteps. I slid the key in and felt that soft catch. The nudge. The turn. The deadbolt gave with a sleepy sigh. I stepped into the cabin and the door creaked softly like it remembered me. The smell hit first. Old wood. Dust warmed by sun. A hint of lavender from the drawer sachets Grandma used to tuck into the linen closet. Under it all, the mineral breath of the lake that sneaks in and settles in the pine boards. I stood in the doorway and let my eyes adjust. The light had that slow, golden quality that makes even cobwebs look intentional. The walls held their silence like a promise. I stood in the living room for a while. Let the present line up with the past so my heart could stop flinching. Everything was just how I remembered. The crocheted blanket over the rocking chair. The one with the stubborn thread that always snagged your ring if you were careless. The tiny ceramic dog on the windowsill facing the water like it was on guard duty. Even the chip in the coffee table from the time Colleen threw a fit and knocked over a bowl of popcorn during one of our teenage movie nights. We were watching a horror film and she said the girl was asking for it and I said, "Nobody asks for that," and the bowl hit the wood and left a permanent small moon. I moved toward the back hallway. The boards there still squeaked in the same places. My heel found the notes without thinking. Grandma's room hadn't changed much. The quilt she made in 1986 with all our names stitched into corner squares was folded at the foot of the bed. Her Bible sat on the nightstand with a receipt tucked in as a bookmark. Dated in February. Tissue-thin pages like wings. The curtains were pulled just enough to let the morning in slow. There was the dresser. The one I had helped her polish every spring with that lemon oil she bought in bulk, like it might stop time. Still smelled faintly like citrus and beeswax. The mirror above it had a faint haze, a soft filter that did not hide anything important. On the corner of the frame hung the little wooden cross the church ladies gave her one Easter when they still made house calls. And the sewing table. The machine covered with a towel that said, "Bless this mess" in fading blue. That's where I found the letter last year. And that's where I found something else now. I pulled the chair out. The legs whispered on the rug. I knelt, felt under the bottom drawer with my fingertips, until I hit the rough edge of something that did not belong to the furniture, a manila folder tucked beneath the bottom drawer. Old, dusty, yellowed with time and a little warped from humidity. Someone had pushed it deep, like they wanted it close and hidden at once. Inside were more papers, copies and originals, signatures and stamps, a second trust document, one I had not seen before. It was older than the first, dated nearly a year before Grandma passed. The paper had that creamy weight old legal paper has. Real, not digital. You could feel the decisions in the fiber, but what caught my eye was the name. Not mine. Colleen's. There it was in clean letters, spelled right, underlined like permanence, a list of assets, the cabin at the top, and then a red rectangle slammed across the page like a stop sign. The words revoked stamped in red across the top. Heavy ink. You could almost feel the pressure that made it. The kind of stamp an old-school lawyer keeps on his desk for when someone changes their mind and decides to do it with force. It was like my breath froze mid-chest. The room leaned for a second and then righted itself. I sat back on my heels and stared. She had originally left the cabin to Colleen, and then changed her mind. My name wasn't a fluke. It was a correction. Me. She knew. I heard it whisper out of me like a prayer I didn't know I had. Suddenly everything made sense. The way Grandma hesitated when Colleen visited those last months, that held breath, that watchfulness. The way she once asked me if people could change their minds about inheritances, like she was asking about the weather. Quiet, casual. But her hands were twisting the tissue in her lap into a tight little rope. She had been hurt, maybe manipulated, maybe love-bombed, maybe worn down by the constant management of people who need to control every frame. But she saw through it in time. I sat on the edge of the bed, the quilt crackling softly under my thighs, and held the document like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. This was more than proof. This was context. This was a map of the part of the story I could feel, but could not point to. Grandma had not just given the cabin to me. She had taken it from Colleen. And they all knew. Or, if they didn't know, they suspected. And they were angry at me for being the place her love landed when she woke up. That is why the cookout had been such a spectacle. Why I had been publicly iced out. Why Mom had said after how Christmas went like that sentence alone could explain a year of cruelty. They had been circling this place like vultures, hoping I would not know what I had. Hoping grief would make me generous to the point of self-erasure. Hoping I would fold. They never counted on Grandma's note. They never counted on this stamp. They never counted on me learning to stand still when they pushed. I put the folder on the bed and kept looking. Not greed. Curiosity. Care. I opened the top dresser drawer and found the lavender sachet flattened under a stack of handkerchiefs. I pressed it to my nose and got a ghost of that dessert sweet smell. I pulled open the little jewelry box with the ballerina who has not spun in 20 years. There were pins and a ring that is worth more to me than to any pawnshop. A shoebox with old Polaroids. Grandpa with a fish bigger than his ego. Grandma with her hair in a scarf, laughing. A picture of me at 8, missing teeth, holding a sparkler and looking at the camera like I trusted it. I closed the drawers. I smoothed the bedspread. I set the folder in my bag with the same care I would use for a newborn. I slipped the strap over my head and felt the weight settle against my hip like a yes. I walked the house once more. The kitchen sink. The mug with a chip. The magnet on the fridge that says, "If you're lucky enough to be at the lake, you're lucky enough." I never liked the font. I liked the truth of it anyway. I left the cabin a few hours later. The sun was higher. The heat had sharpened. Cicadas had started their electric chainsaw choir. I locked the door. The key turned with the small resistance of an old habit. I touched the frame with my palm the way I do with the kids' door at night. I walked to the car and sat for a second with my hands on the wheel and my eyes closed. The smell of pine hung in the air even with the windows up. My heartbeat slowed. I started the engine. Gravel hissed. The road took me. On the drive back, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up with Bryce's name, and for a second I thought about letting it sit in the sun and burn. I slid my thumb to open it. A text. Polite on the surface, familiar underneath in the way men sometimes are when they want to be seen as decent. Bryce. Hey, just heard about the legal stuff. Sorry for how that went down. Hope you're okay. I stared at it and let the car do the thinking. 2 weeks ago, he laughed when I walked up the driveway. 2 weeks ago, he stood shoulder to shoulder with my sister and made me an audience. Now he was texting me like an ally, like he had always been Switzerland. I did not respond to the performance. Me. What do you want, Bryce? He replied within seconds. Too fast to be thoughtful. Fast. Like approval was hovering over his head and he needed to feed it. Bryce. Nothing, just wanted to say I get it. Colleen went too far. That was the moment I knew she was cracking, because Bryce never texted without permission. It's their house rule. It's their marriage. It's fine. It's none of my business. But I know his cadence. I know when the leash is off. Someone was losing control, and it was not me. The air felt different then, lighter in a dangerous way, like right before a storm breaks and the temperature drops, and your skin prickles with warning. I waited until the next family group message, the shared chain where Mom usually posted birthday reminders and half-hearted prayer requests and articles about gut health. It pinged while I was unloading groceries. Mom's name on the screen put a small clench in my stomach out of muscle memory. I wiped my hands and opened it. Mom. Family meeting next Sunday, at our house, attendance expected. There it was, the edict, the stage directions, attendance expected. Not requested, not please. It slid across my screen like she had thrown a net and was waiting to see which of us still believed we were fish. I did not reply. Not at first. I let the dots appear and disappear from cousins who were always too online. I let an aunt send a thumbs up, and then delete it, and then send the praying hands because she remembered who she is in this family. I let Uncle Rick write, "What time?" and Mom reply, 3, and then clarify that it meant 3 p.m. like we were all idiots. Then, after 2 days, I sent one message. The kind that looks small until you measure it against everything that came before. Me. Meeting accepted. Please have a copy of your trust attorney's notes from 2021. I'll bring mine. That was it. No explanation. No fight. Just a scalpel slice of pressure. The kind that bleeds truth instead of chaos. The dots appeared and then stopped. The chat went still in that artificial way a room does when someone powerful walks in. On my couch, I could feel the temperature shift even though the phone was silent. Nate looked over my shoulder when I hit send. He had a smear of paint on his forearm from touching up the hallway. He read the message twice and then looked at me like he was seeing a new door in a familiar room. Nate, you're really going, huh? Me. I want them to say it to my face. He did not argue. He never argues with the part of me that is sure. He just walked over, wrapped his arms around me from behind, and kissed the top of my head. His chest was solid against my back. I let myself lean. Nate. She stole your story. You're just rewriting the ending. I nodded. It felt both too big and exactly right. The night before the meeting, I turned the dining table into a war room, not loud, not messy, just organized. I printed everything. The machine hummed and fed and spit, and I stacked and clipped and labeled. Both trust documents. The notarized deed. The county filing receipts. Photos of the cabin in disrepair before I fixed the plumbing. Pipes sweating under the sink. The day I found the crawl space damp and drove to the hardware store at 8 in the morning with hair unbrushed and a list in my head. Receipts from the tax payments I made last year when nobody else remembered the due date. The scanned note in Grandma's handwriting with the G that looks like a ribbon. And the letter Colleen once sent to Grandma asking for early access to cabin funds. Starting sweet, dripping praise, then turning to a guilt trip so fast the whiplash still aches. Then hostile in the same paragraph when she did not get what she wanted. You could see the tells if you knew her. You could see the switch flip. I slid each pile into a translucent sleeve. I wrote labels with a black pen, careful block letters that would read clear across a table. I tucked extras into a manila folder in case someone tried to walk off with my copy. I put a fresh set of ink in the printer just to be petty in a way that would never show. I packed a small stapler, a highlighter, a notebook, calm as a kit. I have mine. I laid everything out and stood back. The table looked like a case file in a show where the detective finally lets you see the board. Lines connecting, names, dates, not chaos, pattern. I took a picture. Not for them. For me. To remember that I did not raise my voice. I did not grab. I did not beg. I had the receipts. I had the law. I had the letter with trust written in a hand that still lives inside my own. I turned off the lamp over the table and the papers went soft in the dim, like snow in streetlight. In the morning, I would drive across town and walk into my mother's house and sit on her couch and wait for her to make the room small. I would bring my pages and my quiet. I would let the facts eat the performance. I would watch Colleen try to smile her way out while Bryce stared at the pattern in the rug like it could tell him the ending. I would keep my hands flat on my knees and my shoulders down. I would say only what was needed. I would remember the way the lake sounded when I left the cabin. That patient lap. That old music. I did not need their permission to be right. I did not need their apology to be whole. But I wanted the record corrected where it first went wrong. I wanted their faces when the stamp hit the page. I wanted to be present for the moment the story stopped lying about me. So I packed my bag. I set it by the door. I turned off the lights. I went to bed and slept like someone who finally understands the difference between a fight and a boundary. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not because I wanted to be the first one there, because I knew they'd already be gathered without me, rehearing their lines, smoothing their faces, setting the room to tilt their way. They always did that. Talked in circles before I walked in, set the tone, decided the script, handed each other the right. Reactions like cue cards. But not today. Today, I brought my own stage directions. I pulled up to my mother's house in Bloomfield Hills, that same red brick two-story where we used to eat frozen lasagna on Sundays, while the TV hissed with some game nobody was really watching. The cedar tree still leaned toward the driveway like it had a secret to tell the hood of my car. This is the house where I learned not to speak unless someone asked a question first. Where yes ma'am and sure, whatever you want lived in my mouth like permanent furniture. The lawn was edged like a magazine cover. The porch mat said, "Welcome" in cursive, which has always felt like a dare. I walked in without knocking. The door gave that familiar sticky catch and then released. A small surrender. The cool of the air conditioning hit my skin and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and coffee. Colleen was on the couch, arms folded tight, like she was holding in a scream and also feeding it. Bryce sat next to her, knee bouncing, looking everywhere but at me. Mantle, window, an invisible spot on the armrest that must have been fascinating. Mom stood by the fireplace, one hand on her hip like she was already exhausted by my presence, the other gripping a folded paper like it could double as a weapon. A framed photo of Grandma sat on the bookcase behind her, angled so the glass caught a rectangle of light. The smile in it didn't know we were here. Uncle Rick was there too, the human shrug of the family, flipping through a printout like this was just another church committee meeting where someone needed to decide the color of the new carpet. He lifted his chin at me in a who-knows way and went back to skimming. I could feel the current in the room, the pre-game hum of people who think they've got the numbers. Me. You said there'd be documents. My voice sounded steady against all that upholstery. Mom didn't answer right away. She motioned toward the kitchen table with her chin, queenly, like I was a server and she was done with the appetizer. There was a manila folder sitting there. Thin, sloppy, dog-eared. I could tell from 6 feet away it would be nothing. A few photocopies. A sticky note with a name spelled wrong. Maybe a receipt from a grocery run tucked in by accident. I set my own file down next to it. Twice as thick. Tabbed. Organized. Color-coded because calm is sometimes a shade you choose. The table made a soft thunk under the weight. Colleen's eyes clocked the tabs. Bryce's knee stopped bouncing. Mom's mouth barely moved, but the muscle in her jaw did. Me. Before anyone says a word, I'm going to read something. Colleen let out a fake laugh, the kind that scrapes at the end like it ran out of gas. She shook her head like she couldn't believe I had the nerve to speak first in a house that has always told me to wait my turn. I ignored it. My hands were already moving, muscle memory from too many late nights at the kitchen table. I pulled out a sheet protector, slid the paper free. Me. This is a letter dated June 3rd, 2022. Grandma wrote it by hand. I held it up but didn't pass it around. Some things you don't let out of your grip in this family. The loopy lines of her handwriting looked like her voice sounds in my head when I'm tired. Me. I am changing the cabin deed because I believe Danielle will respect it. I've seen enough from the others to know they only show up when it benefits them. I've made mistakes. I won't make one more. I paused. Let them sit in that. Let the words settle on the furniture. Let the air do its job. You could feel the letter working, the way truth changes a room's temperature faster than the thermostat ever could. Bryce rubbed his palm on his jeans. Colleen blinked too slow, then too fast. Mom stared at a point between my shoulder and the wall, calculating the angle where none of this would be happening. Then I opened the second document. The revocation. The stamp still felt loud, even on paper. Me. This is a trust revocation filed with a notary in May 2022, reversing the earlier beneficiary. Colleen, here's the signature. Here's the notary stamp. It was filed 2 days later in the county clerk's office. Bryce. How do we know she wasn't confused? She was sick that year. Me. Sick enough to throw Colleen a bridal shower? Sick enough to host Thanksgiving? You mean that kind of sick? Bryce's mouth opened, then closed. He went quiet the way people do when the room refuses to bend with them. The print on Mom's cheekbone got sharper, a little flush that wasn't blush. Mom finally spoke, and there it was. That tone she saves for when she's the victim and director at once. Mom. This isn't what she wanted. You manipulated her. You know she hated confrontation. Me. Then why are you trying so hard to confront me now? Her mouth tightened. A tiny twitch that said I was out of my assigned seat. I felt a flicker of the old fear, that child heat in the chest. I let it burn out. Me. The truth is, she saw through you. Through both of you. I turned to Colleen. She squared her shoulders like she was about to deliver a keynote. Me. Do you want to explain the letter you sent Grandma? The one asking her to expedite your inheritance so you and Bryce could put a down payment on a house in Nashville? Colleen's face dropped, the timelines she was holding in her head scattered like a stack of index cards knocked off a desk. She reached for a shrug and came up with air. Colleen. That letter was private. Me. Grandma gave it to me. Said it was the moment she knew she made a mistake trusting you. A hairline crack is still a crack. That was it. The shell around her. All that practiced poise. The curated Instagram version of herself. It made a tiny sound I could hear even over the refrigerator hum from the kitchen. Colleen stood too fast, hands flat on her thighs, then lifted them like she wasn't sure if she should push the air or catch it. Colleen, you think this makes you better than me? You're still the one who made her cry on her birthday. You're still the one who ruined Christmas. I stayed seated, palms on the table, calm. It's amazing how much power doesn't need volume. Me. I didn't ruin her. I just stopped protecting her from consequences. The words landed like a clean cut. Mom's voice went flat. That Midwest ice that can burn worse than heat. Mom. So what happens now? You sell it? You keep it locked? You punish everyone for the next 20 years? I looked her in the eye. The same eyes that used to watch me cross a street like the world would eat me if I looked away. Me. I protect it. That's what I do. Because I was the only one who didn't treat it like a prize. Uncle Rick finally set his paper down. He looked at me over his glasses like a man who has negotiated parking at county fairs and thinks all problems can be solved with a handshake and a raffle ticket. Uncle Rick, is there a path where this doesn't end in lawyers? Me. Only if everyone accepts the truth. The cabin is mine. The documents are final. And anyone who steps on that property without permission will be treated like any other trespasser. They stared at me. Like I was a stranger. Like they were seeing me for the first time and realizing I wasn't theirs to control anymore. The living room clock ticked too loud for a full 3 beats. In the silence, I could hear the compressor kick on and the soft whoosh of the vent over my shoulder. It felt like the house itself exhaled. I gathered my folder. Not rushed. Deliberate. I slid each sheet back into its sleeve like tucking a child into bed. I closed the flap. The Velcro made a quiet rip that sounded final. Colleen took a step. Reflex, more than plan. Colleen. Danielle. Me. She trusted me. That's the difference. The words were simple. They were a key turning in a lock that had been installed decades ago. I stood. My chair legs made a small scrape on the hardwood, a sound as ordinary as breakfast. I walked to the door. Nobody moved to stop me. Mom's hand lifted an inch and fell like she realized gesture alone wasn't going to work anymore. The sun was hot on the pavement. It came up off the driveway in waves you could see if you squinted, heat mirage turning the street into water. A lawn service 2 houses down revved a mower, the sound a mechanical snarl that somehow felt like applause. Birds chirped like nothing happened. A delivery truck clattered past with a loose dolly. But inside me, everything had shifted. The gravity in my body moved. The center found me again. I took a breath that reached further than my collarbones. The air tasted like cut grass and exhaust, and the citrus cleaner my mother buys by the gallon. I stood on that porch, where I had waited to be called in for years and realized I could simply leave. No one to chase me down the steps. No hand on my arm. No last word tossed at my back like a stone. I walked to my car, the folder tucked against my ribs. It felt warm from my hands. I could see my reflection in the window. Jaw set, eyes clear, hair pulled back because function beats pretty on days like this. I got in. The seat was hot, but I didn't flinch. I put the folder on the passenger seat and buckled it in without thinking. Old habits from strapping precious things into cars. My phone buzzed. A cousin. Then another. I turned it face down on the console. Let them speak into a room I wasn't in. I gripped the wheel. The grooves in the leather were familiar. My palms found their spots like hands finding a piano after years away. I didn't start the engine yet. I let the moment be what it was. A line drawn, a door closed. A woman breathing in a space that used to belong to everyone but her. Nate called. I answered on speaker. Nate. How'd it go? Me. I said what needed saying. Nate. And? Me. They heard it. He was quiet for a beat. The kind of silence that means respect, not absence. Nate. You want me to have tacos ready, or do you want to pick up something greasy and celebratory? Me. Tacos. But messy ones. Nate laughed. Soft. The sound eased something in my chest I didn't realize was still tight. Nate. On it. Drive safe. The call clicked off. I started the car. The AC sputtered and then sighed cold. I watched the rear view for a second. Through the oval of glass, I saw my mother's front window. The curtain shifted. A shadow moved. I thought of Grandma's letter. I thought of the word revoked in red. I thought of the cabin at dawn, dust floating in a shaft of light like a galaxy you could hold. I pulled out slow, turned onto the street. The tires whispered over the warm blacktop. A kid on a scooter shot across a driveway, and his dad lunged and grabbed the handle just in time. The kid laughed, thrilled by the near miss. The dad breathed hard and smiled anyway. Life kept being life. Lunch still needed making. A plumber was probably fixing a leak somewhere. A stranger was getting good news in a bland office with gray carpet. I did not feel above any of it. I felt anchored to it for the first time in months. At the light, I thought about Uncle Rick's question. Is there a path where this doesn't end in lawyers? Maybe. Maybe not. I wasn't afraid of lawyers. I was done being afraid of my family's opinion of me. Those are different games. One eats years. The other eats afternoons and pays you back in certainty. When the light turned green, I took the left. I could have gone straight and gotten home quicker. I took the left because it went past the park where Grandma used to sit on a bench and watch the geese like they were an opera. The benches were empty in the heat. The pond looked thick and still. I rolled the window down and let the hot air hit my face. It smelled like algae and summer and the particular metallic sweetness of sprinklers on. I pictured the kitchen table at home with all the tabs staring up like little flags. I pictured the cabin key in the dish by our door, the way it feels colder than the others. I pictured my children's faces when I told them tonight, we don't have to dread holidays anymore. We can make our own. We can invite who we want. We can say no and mean it. We can set the table with whatever plates we have clean, and the truth can sit at the head like it belongs there. I stopped at the store for limes and tortillas, the good kind, the ones that puff a little when they hit the pan right. I added cilantro because I like how the smell grabs your face and says, pay attention. The cashier said, how's your day? And I said, changing. And she smiled like she knew exactly what I meant without needing the details. People know endings and beginnings when they see them, even if they don't know which is which. Back in the car, I checked the family thread. It was a storm of dots and deletes and half-typed sentences. Mom had written, we will be consulting counsel, and then deleted it. Colleen had written, we're not done, and not sent it. Bryce had sent a thumbs up to no message at all. I typed nothing. I set the phone back down. Some fights win themselves if you stop feeding them. At home, I spread tortillas on a baking sheet and watched them blister under the broiler. Nate chopped onions with a speed I trust. The kids ran in circles like weather patterns. The smell of cumin and lime and seared meat filled the apartment until the day's sharpness dulled into something warm. Ava asked if we could take the first tacos to the porch. I said yes. We sat with our knees touching and our fingers sticky, and listened to a neighbor's radio 2 floors down playing a song that came out when I was in high school. Miles said, it sounds old. And I said, it sounds right. And he grinned with salsa on his lip. I told them, in pieces they could hold, what happened in Bloomfield Hills. I said, we don't have to prove anything anymore. I said, we are allowed to keep what we're given. I said, sometimes love looks like a key in your own hand. They nodded. They asked if we could go to the cabin next weekend. I said yes. We made a list. Fix the screen door. mow, swim, teach Miles to dive off the end of the dock, let Ava stay up late enough to see the Milky Way. Add ketchup to the cabin pantry because somehow there's never ketchup. When the sun dropped and the kitchen got that deep gold it gets for 10 minutes in July, I washed the cutting board and put the knife away, and stood there with my hands on the edge of the sink. The window over it showed a slice of sky going purple. I felt the shift again, gentle but permanent, like a book clicking shut when the last page settles. Had walked into my mother's house with a folder and a spine, and walked out with both. The birds did not change their song. The world did not declare me reborn, but the floor under me felt true. Later, after the kids were asleep and the dishwasher muttered to itself, I opened the folder one more time. I ran my finger along the edge of Grandma's letter, not to count, just to touch. I didn't need to reread it. I just needed to remember the way the paper feels. A little soft, a little stubborn, like her. I tucked it back. I slid the folder onto the top shelf of the hall closet behind the extra blankets, where precious things hide in plain sight. Then I turned off the lights and let the dark hold me without a single demand.